Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. I'm Stephanie Jordan. I'm the local food program manager at Sustainable Solano, and I'm really happy to have all of you with us today for our Kiss the Ground discussion, Q&A, chit chat, all of that. So I have with us today Ryland Engelhart, who is the co-founder and executive director of Kiss the Ground, which is the nonprofit, and he is also the producer of Kiss the Ground, the film. And joining him is Matthew Engelhart, his father, who is owner and operator of Beloved Farm. And if you're local, you might know Beloved Farm. They are near Vacaville here in Solano County. So Allison, our communications manager, is posting some stuff in the chat, some websites that you might want to reference, perhaps after the talk. And before we get started, just to let you know how the format will go, we're going to do a conversation with these two gentlemen here today, and then we will open it up to the audience for questions and answers. And if you want to post any questions in the chat box, you may do so. We will read that back to them at the end. But what we think would be even better is to use the raise hand function, and then you can ask questions directly to our guests. So I think I still see a few people coming in, but we're just going to jump on in, I think, because we're a little after 4. So, you know, this is a question, it's sort of a chicken and egg question, I think. Usually those chicken and egg questions get directed to the farmer, but I think I'm going to throw it at Ryland first. So, you know, you were around the farm, but then you have the nonprofit, and then there's the film. So, I mean, which came first? How did all of this, you know, what led to the creation of this whole thing? What was first, I think, is the question. Like, you know, you could give us the play-by-play of like, what was the inspiration? What, you know, this is big work that you're doing, and you had to have been drawn to this, you know, by something. And so I'd love to just kind of get a little backstory on, you know, how you got into this and what was created first and kind of what led to the next thing.
Yeah, totally. Thank you. So, yeah, I mean, I grew up, you know, we grew up on a old dairy farm in upstate New York outside of Ithaca, and wasn't really much of a working farm. We had apple orchard and a vegetable garden, but definitely set some context for connection to the land and nature and understanding where food comes from. So that was like way back in the day. And then my dad started farming Beloved Farm probably, I don't know if it's what, 15, how many, no, 12 years ago, 10 years ago?
Yeah, but you forgot the Hawaii farm in there.
Okay. Oh yeah. Don't forget. So yeah, so dad started a organic, kind of very diverse permaculture farm in Hawaii called La Lima, probably over 25 years ago, that our cousin had been running for all those years, and dad had been kind of guiding from afar. And then we'd been in the organic food business with Cafe Gratitude and Gracias Madre. So we were connected to food that way. And kind of all that led to a trip to New Zealand, where I had gotten invited to go to a conference in Auckland called the Healthy Living Conference. And I went there to give a talk on sacred commerce, which was also another book and sort of business philosophy that my father and stepmom had created as the business culture philosophy of Cafe Gratitude. And so I went to New Zealand, gave this talk. I was also sharing a film that we had previously made called May I Be Frank, which was a transformational film about a guy who came into Cafe Gratitude and changed his lifestyle, behavior, diet through the guidance of tenets of Cafe Gratitude. So there in New Zealand, I'm sitting in an audience of a panel discussion called Can Human Beings Sustain Themselves on Planet Earth? and 5 out of the 6 experts say no, that it's dire, and that, you know, we've destroyed so much of our biodiversity and landscape, and destruction of our oceans and forests. And then the last person who speaks is a guy by the name of Graham Sate, who's a farm consultant, soil scientist, you know, trainer of agronomists. And basically he makes this connection between soil health, human health, and planetary health, and describes the carbon cycle for the first time that I'd ever heard in my life. And basically describes that carbon is not the enemy, it's the building block of life, and we just have an imbalance of that carbon that's been burned from fossil fuels into the atmosphere, and the mismanagement of soil. And that soil is this beautiful storage shed, this cabinet that could receive all that excess carbon, or a lot of that excess carbon, and that if we understood that integral relationship that we have to nature and land management, we could actually turn agriculture from being one of the most destructive systems on the planet to the great redeemer. And it was a revelation of like truth and understanding, and oh my God, that's compelling, inspiring, hopeful, possible. I get it, it's intuitive. And so it just, that moment changed my life forever. I saw how this could happen, and that this transformation could take place, and that everyone who eats could be a part of it. And I came back to Los Angeles, which is where I was living, and became a complete evangelist for soil. Everywhere I went, I was talking about the importance of soil as it relates to human health, but also planetary health and climate change. And so that led to the creation of a nonprofit in my living room, where I gathered people for an entire year. Every Monday for a couple hours, we just had a working group that turned into a nonprofit. And then, you know, actually the kind of auspicious miracle was I moved into a home in Venice, California, and the people who were moving out of that home were 2 filmmakers by the name of Josh and Rebecca Takal. And when they were moving out, I said, "Do you guys know about soil? You're filmmakers. Let's make a film about soil." And they said, no, not interested. Sounds boring. No one's going to be interested in a film about soil. Sounds dreadful. So they left, and, you know, I went on evangelizing to other people. And then they ended up calling me 6 months later and said, "You guys, we heard you're, you know, creating a nonprofit called Kiss the Ground, and you're doing a bunch of advocacy work around regenerative agriculture and healthy soils. We'd like to collaborate with you and make a film." And I said, of course, yes. And, you know, again, the kind of the whisper that I had gotten in that inspirational moment back in New Zealand was that we could have this message of regeneration become a globally adopted and understood concept. And so I knew that media and storytelling was a really clear pathway to do that. And so here we are 7 years later of that collaboration, and that film, you know, coming out on Netflix September 22nd.
Yeah. Do you have any idea, Ryland, what clicked in the Takals to circle back with you? Was there something that happened in their life where all of a sudden they were like, "Wait, I heard about the soil and the relationship"?
That's a great question that no one's ever asked me. They moved to an avocado ranch, like a 7-acre, maybe 5-acre avocado ranch in Ojai. And, you know, they started to tend to, you know, land that they'd never done before. And then I got to give credit to John Rulak, who is a Bay Area healthy food pioneer, and started the company Nutiva Organic Foods. And he approached them about making a film about soil as well as a climate change solution. And I think he even you know, put up some money to make a teaser, to make a teaser for the film. And that's when they called me and said, "Hey, we've got this proposal and a little money from John Rulak," who I had been also in communication with, and we had been co-conspirators in our evangelism for soil. And that was kind of it. And then we started raising money in small increments. And, again, making a film, it was not like, we had one plan, we had one budget, and we got the thing done. It was like, you have a little plan, you raise a little budget, and then you run out of money, you have to raise more money. And then, so it was a total piecemeal experiment over 7 years, with a lot of,
a little bit like farming, I would say, sometimes when you're just getting started.
Yeah, a lot of failures, and a lot of like, this isn't going to work, and a lot of times like, no, let's just give up. This is enough is enough. But again, there was always that little whisper that continued to say, this must go on. And here
it
we are.
did. Yeah. So here we are. Yeah, I grew up in Nebraska, and my dad was a farmer, and so we all know what kind of farm that was. It's the disaster with the dead soil. And and then I come out here and I see operations like Be Love Farm, and I'm thinking, the amount of land in the Midwest that could potentially be used for something else and farmed in a different way, it's a staggering idea, but one that needs to be heard. And so Matthew, I'm going to go over to you and just ask about how, what spurred you to create Be Love Farm, and did you have plans, background, like how did that all come about?
Well, you have to go back to like 8th grade. I went to Alaska, and there were all, before the pipeline, and there were all these people living off the grid in the bush, self-sufficient, and I thought, that's kind of cool. So I moved from high school. I graduated from high school and moved into a teepee and lived in the Adirondacks for a couple years. So I've always been in self-sufficiency, gardening. I realized that I've been gardening for 50 years, almost 50 years, like 45 years. And I went to a biodynamic farm, the first biodynamic farming conference in Vermont 42 years ago. So this is something I've always had my hands in to different degrees. And so it's been evolving. And, I got deep into the restaurant business. We lived in the city of San Francisco for 8 years. Then Tercy and I went on a drive into Mendocino when we rented a house up there, and we said, why do we live in the city? We looked at each other. Why do we live in the city? We're country people. I never lived in a city till I was like 50 years old or 40 something. And I said, so we had the opportunity, and we started looking, and I would never have thought Vacaville would be a place that I would live. It was always a stop on the way to Sacramento of, factory outlets. It was nothing sexy, sorry to say, about Vacaville in my mind, in my San Francisco elitist mind. But, there was an ad in the California Certified Organic Farmers website about this 21-acre farm. And we looked at it and we said, wow, this is beautiful. And off we went. Yeah. And because I'd been, managing from afar our permaculture farm in Hawaii with my cousin, he schooled me in a lot of concepts of regeneration and permaculture. So, I guess I was ready.
Right, the stars aligned. So,
Yeah.
you now have a larger farm operation, but Ryland, I understand that you have, you do some of this in practice at your home in Southern California, correct? And so, the question is about scale. Like, do people need to think, I can't engage in this work unless I have, an acre or 5 acres or whatever it is, how can you do it on a smaller scale?
Yeah, I think that, a big part of what Kiss the Ground has been promoting and doing and creating and sharing is sort of shifting our awareness and our perspective and consciousness around having a more integrated and interconnected relationship to the living world, to nature, to the earth. And so, you know, when I first got the bug and got turned on, you know, that was when I first became a composter. I had always known that it was good to compost. It was the right thing to do, but I just didn't, you know, I didn't. So again, it led to, you know, me first, you know, becoming someone who could actually turn waste into fertility, and actually being excited about that, you know, running, you know, multiple restaurants in Los Angeles that are all, you know, full of celebrities and cool people, and finding a lot of joy in creating dirt that had gone through the belly of a worm, and holding it in my hands and going, this is real work. This is cool. And so, yeah, I think it's, you know, when we get it, and we get the role that humans, you know, can play in being good stewards of the earth, it can totally start in small ways. You know, it led to, you know, me starting for the first time as an adult, you know, compost, garden, planting fruit trees, you know, starting to tend to nature in the context, or, you know, what I had. I mean, essentially I had a little, you know, a little strip of soil between my walkway where my car was, and another little strip of soil where I had 2 compost bins. And I turned my fairway between the sidewalk and my street, put 2 big raised beds, or 3 big raised beds there, and started growing food, and started tending to soil, and making compost, and learning how life works at a very experiential, practical, hands-on level. And so,
I think it can even start before that. I think that regeneration starts with our health, and regenerating the flora in our gut, and regenerating each other through, you know, social work, or through transformation, or through healing, because healing from trauma. I mean, regeneration is a very fulfilling occupation, and it can take many, many forms. It can take the form of like a little planter on your deck, and it can, you know, we can regenerate each other through love. I mean, it's not just earth care, though that's a huge part of it, and I don't want to diminish that, but bringing more life to the life we have is what regeneration is, and all of us can participate in it. And it's a very fulfilling task to, bring more life to whatever life we do have.
Yeah, and I love, you know, the idea that love is, you know, such an expression of regeneration, because it's a gift that is its only nature is to be given forward, to be perpetuated, and to be expressed more, a continuum of that love. It doesn't need anything returned. Love is a gift. And so that's regeneration, is this expression of life giving itself fully to, you know.
And it always requires sacrifice. Love requires sacrifice, and regeneration requires sacrifice. If something has to die to regenerate, and most often we have to die in our ego to fully love, to fully surrender, to fully have no agenda, just to love. It requires a death within us, and that's a sacrifice. And regeneration requires sacrifice. There's always something dying to bring forth the next generation, and I think it's really important to remember that love is a selfless thing. Regeneration is a selfless thing.
Although, Matthew, you know, I've been to your farm, and I've been on a couple of your farm tours, and I don't know if I would think about it as something dying. I almost think about it as an energy that is changing form, right?
Yes.
And it's not necessarily ceasing to exist. It's just changing and morphing into something else that will then serve another part of that ecosystem, right?
That's correct. Yeah, forms, but we get attached to forms. Yeah, the form is constantly changing. Yeah, the form dies.
Okay, so maybe separate your ego from the form that you're getting attached to.
Yeah, yeah,
and then,
exactly.
and go from there, maybe. Yeah.
Someone asked on where Kiss the Ground came from. I saw it come up.
Yeah,
Kiss the Ground comes from a Rumi poem. There are hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground. So it's a poem about, there's so many ways to be humble, to express love, and one of them is to kiss the ground.
Yeah, I think that the full quote is, "Let the beauty you love be all that you do. There's hundreds of ways to kneel and kiss the ground."
That's awesome. I think there was also a question that came up about how did Be Love Farm get its name?
Oh, well, okay, that's a great question. So, being, to be, our definition of being, or one of our definitions for being in the work that we do, is being is what we're thinking, we're speaking, we're acting, the actions we're taking, our beliefs, and our attitude. Okay, that's being. If you take all of that combined, that's who we're being. Thought, speech, belief, action, attitudes. So be love means that we're going to think, speak, believe, act, and attitude love. Like we're going to be love. We're going to embrace love in that we're going to, in all cylinders of our being, those 5 cylinders, we're going to fill with love. Our attention's going to be on love. So that's what we do there.
And at a more explicit, practical level, when me and my dad took me to a transformational course many years ago, like a men's week workshop, and I got this download that the way to express masculinity was to be be love, to be a force of love in the world. And I had to hit to get a tattoo on my forearm that says "Be and Love," in the place that David Carradine from that old show Kung Fu, where he had the dragons on his arm, and to get those "Be Love" tattoos. So I asked my dad if he'd get a "Be Love" tattoo. He was probably, 40 something, and I was, 20 something. And we went down into the San Francisco and Potrero Hill and got some "Be Love" tattoos. And then that became kind of the motto and the attitude and the kind of way of being of Cafe Gratitude, Be Love Farm, and all that we were doing.
So I just want to get a quick read from the audience. How many of our people joining us here have seen the film already? I don't know. Thumbs up, show of hands. I'm going to put you guys on gallery. I see. Oh yeah, there's a crowd here. Oh, people are now turning on their videos. Yeah, you can do the thumbs up. Okay, so I'd say it's at least half. So that's good. Okay, let me switch my thing back here so I can see. So Ryland, what kind of response have you gotten from the film? And has anything surprised you, or impressed you, or disappointed you? Or I'm just curious, like what kind of feedback and response have you gotten from the film?
I'd say, I've gotten, the feedback has been remarkable, tremendous, and from all over the world. All over the world. I mean, the film is being shown in 40 countries and 25 languages, and it's the feedback has been tremendous. Some of the most touching stories have been simple things like a woman who's been working in the agricultural space for many years on farms doing kind of regenerative ag, and her parents have kind of totally disowned her and thought that she was wasting her life, and then seeing the film and being like, oh my God, I get it. What you're doing is amazing. thank you, like that kind of family regeneration, when people get the importance of caring for our soil. I got another message from a guy in Texas who said, I just got finished watching your film. I went outside, I got down on my knees, and I kissed the ground. And then I kissed it again. And it smelled so good. And then I got up, and he goes, I'm no California hippie. I'm a Texas I'm an oil field truck driver. Thank you for your work. Thank you for what you're doing. And so, just seeing the broad scope of people being touched, and then seeing it being, we had heard from Prince Charles was sharing with everyone in his community. It's just like, and at the largest corporations, it's being shared, in agriculture companies. So just the diversity of realms that it's being shared and communicated about has been remarkable.
Tell them about the farmer cut and the classroom cut.
Yeah, so we have 2 45-minute cuts that have been completed. One that's specifically designed for farmers, less heavy on the climate change conversation and more heavy on sort of farmer profitability and land resilience.
I can share that with my people back in Nebraska then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then another one that is for classrooms, that we've actually created specifically the filmmakers, Josh and Rebecca, have created a relationship with the National School Teachers Association, to where there's going to be a curriculum and kind of workbook that goes with the film that's going to be integrated into 114,000 schools, to be seen by 30 million students. So the seeds that are being planted there is tremendous. And then, one last thing, which, I just want to address, because I would say out of all the extraordinary positive feedback, there has been kind of a coalition of feedback of kind of criticism about the film, and really, in the perspective of social justice, diversity, equity, and representation. And I've spoken a few times and to a few publications about this, that where I feel like we missed the mark was that we didn't really create a clear and connected narrative to the sort of indigenous worldview that was being lived and managing land the colonization of this country, really was underpinnings and expressions of a regenerative view on life and on land management, and that we missed the mark in not making that connection explicit in the film. And so, within the educational cut, we've actually added a scene that really acknowledges the relationship between the Lakota people and their relationship to bison and land and nature, and showing that interconnection and that relationship to life.
That's interesting. That's great. That's a good point, and I'm glad that you are bringing that back, and bringing visibility to that. I want to just point out, we're going to go to questions soon, because I think that there's a lot floating out there, but I also just wanted to show people that there is also a book out there. So film, book, all of it. And in the book, I noticed there are kind of some steps, and you guys already touched on this, on like what to do next. Once people have seen the film, read the book, maybe talked to you guys, heard this discussion, what can they do next? And I think Matthew was speaking to that, where it kind of starts with your own health and And, you know, even if you don't have the capacity to do the gardening, you have the capacity to try to regenerate your own self, right? So anyway, I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. And let me jump over to the chat. There was, here's a question from Matthew. Are you aware of anyone else doing your style of farming in Solano County? I don't know.
I mean, probably not with the diversity that we have. I know that certainly there's organic farmers, and certainly there's people doing planned grazing, and certainly there's people. You know, I think that Be Love Farm, we've done with the diversity and the animal integration and the whole thing. It's quite a special model, and I don't know of any models with quite that much diversity. So no, not exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I know of anyone either, to be honest with you. Let's see, there were some questions, Ryland, about the educational cuts. Will they be released on Netflix? And how could people watch the educational cuts if they're not in a school that's showing it? So there's a question about accessibility to those.
Yeah, they will be available for free on our websites, but not Netflix. Not just because we don't. I mean, we would like to have it available on Netflix, but that's not we don't have they're not just giving us like, oh, you've got some, you know, we don't have access to doing that, but we will have them provided widely accessible on our websites for free.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Someone also had some reservations about the film. Let's see. Oh no, I think Trista, you're welcome to unmute yourself. Did that get answered? She's out there. She said, I had some reservations about the film, but then she kind of came back.
Cannot unmute themselves. They have to use the raise hand button to unmute.
It got answered, she said.
But yeah,
okay.
You can answer in the chat.
Okay. Oh, yep, it did. Okay, thank you. I'm scrolling up and got answer scrolling down. There's another question. I don't know if you guys know that. Does anybody know if California Sierra Club's sustainable ag folks have been involved with this effort? I'm not sure if they mean your effort or Matthew and Ryland's effort, or just in general farming around the area.
We're doing a screening with the Sierra Club folks, similar to this, but they have not been explicitly involved in this project. They may have in their sustainable ag programs, maybe, you know, doing something around regenerative ag, but not specifically involved with us.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, there's a bunch of questions now. So Mike says, why should growers change their practices? Glad to hear that there is a new cut that emphasizes farm profitability. If profitable, why are so many growers currently not using such practices?
It's a great
Matthew,
question.
why don't you take that one?
Yeah. So, well, just a little bit big picture. You know, agriculture is really, really difficult career. The system is slated against the small grower. It's all, you know, it's about volume, it's about profitability, and a lot of commercial farmers are struggling. A lot of commercial farmers are subsidized by the government. I think something like 50% of all farm families have an outside income, off-farm income. So how we raise our food is really tricky because, and one of the problems is we expect food to be cheap. And so we're for all farmers, small farmers, it's often a struggle. Right now, for instance, walnut, there's a organic walnut farmers are getting $1 a pound for their walnuts, if they're lucky, if they can get rid of them. Well, it's almost hard to pick them up off the ground for $1 a pound. Like, because the other thing about agriculture, there's always someone somewhere that overproduced, whether it's Brazil or China. So you say, well, I got to make this much for it. And there's always someone that can come in for less money. So it's just overall, big or small, it's a difficult formula. It's a difficult puzzle. And why people would change is because they're either inspired by making a difference in the health of their soil and the health of their planet, or because they can't make it. Their current system is not working, and you'll see in the film, the reason he got driven to regenerative farming, Gabe Brown, 5,000 acres in North Dakota, is because he was doing commodity crops, and the weather killed him for about 5 years in a row. He said, I got to do something different. So he started focusing on soil and diversity, and he's way more profitable than his neighbors. But change, we have to also realize, is just because you look, like if you're an addict and you look at someone who's successful, it doesn't mean you're going to be able to make that change. Change is always scary. Any change is scary. So even for a farmer that's making barely anything, to like give up the sprays and give up the chemicals and like go to this whole new thing where you have to be you have to do much more thinking and much more thinking in a more holistic way, because you're going to have dealing with diversity and more crops and maybe animals. It's scary. And it's like change is always scary. So, why would a grower change? I think that was the question. Well, a lot of them won't or haven't, because either there's not enough pressure internally or externally for them to change. Yeah. That's why they won't change.
When you're getting subsidized by the government and running these big farms, and the seeds, the herbicides, the pesticides, the inputs, my dad wanted to farm organically at one point, and then he realized it would be impossible. There's just a little wire fence between him and, acres and acres and miles around. So
yeah, and it's no different than why would someone give up the advice of their doctor and get off the meds and go, stop eating sugar and start meditating and whatever, doing lifestyle management. It's like, it's scary to get off the meds. It's scary to get off the meds, but it's possible.
Yeah.
Quite often.
Matthew, while you're talking, there's a question about cows. Has there been any pushback about the role of cows, among many others? David Attenborough insists that we should move to vegetarianism. I know you've got something to say about that.
Yeah, so that's true. I mean, if you don't have access to animal protein that comes from integrated, grass-fed, grass-finished system where the animals are used to build soil, then a plant-based diet is probably the best. But that you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's not all or nothing. There is nature without animals wouldn't be nature, would it? Well, natural farming without animals wouldn't be natural farming either. So animals have a place in nature. They have a place in farming. But whoever asked the question is absolutely correct. This idea of growing grains and converting that protein into animal protein by feeding it to animals is insane. We're cutting down the rainforest as fast as we can to grow cheap soy so that we can have a chicken breast at Costco for $1.39. That's insane. But that doesn't mean all animals are bad. We tend to go, as human beings, we tend to swing from here to the other extreme. And, there's a middle path. And there is a place for animals. And, in the future, we will be eating less animal protein. I'm quite sure of it. But that doesn't mean that animals aren't really an important tool for managing and stewarding land, because they are.
Mm-hmm. One more question for you, Matthew, and then we'll move back over to Ryland. So the question, there's a comment first, great take on the systemic challenges across different scales of farming. Where do transitional lands and transitioning farmers find support in moving to farming that puts the soil health first? So they want to know, what are your inspirations and go-to resources for transitioning to that regenerative agriculture?
Well, I think Ryland should speak to this because, Ryland, what's the name of that institute that Gabe and Ray run?
Understanding Ag, or Soil Health Academy. We actually Kiss the Ground. One of our 3 programs as a nonprofit is providing scholarships for farmers to have technical training, mentorship, and soil testing to make the transition. So part of donating to Kiss the Ground, and a lot of the money that we raise every year goes to funding that technical training and education and mentorship and soil testing for farmers. So that's, and we have a program that's based here in California and also in Minnesota. Kiss the Ground, if you go to kisstheground.com, our farmland program is, it's one of the resources that farmers can, if they're interested, they can apply, and we provide scholarships to have them having the technical training and mentorship and soil testing to make that transition. And so, yeah, that's one. There's a program in California that was brought out through Jerry Brown called the Soil Health Initiative, which was it was a pilot project that you could, Dad, that it's the Comet Planner, and you can apply, you can basically figure out what practices you could do regeneratively on your operation, figure out how much carbon could be sequestered, and then there's seed funding for farmers to make that through the state of California. But you can look up the Comet Planner online, and that's another resource for specifically California farmers.
Got it. Ryland, we have a devil's advocate here. It says growers wanting to do good will not be enough. Does Kiss the Ground have non-altruistic recommendations? For example, carbon tax or community-supported ag? Although I would think community-supported ag is kind of doing good, maybe. I don't know. Address that?
Yeah, I mean that's a big question. There's billions of dollars in the carbon credits world, but because soils are fungible, movable, they're not like static, they're not stationary. It's a very difficult that equation and that monitoring and the science to monitor soil carbon as the incentive to get farmers to go in that direction has not been sorted out. I think it is potentially a part of the solution. I think carbon is also a little bit of the next monoculture, or the monocult, where I think there's a greater diversity of ecosystem services that farmers could be potentially paid for their contribution to the commons based on how they're practicing their ag. And I think that there's an opportunity for the Farm Bill and for government and subsidies and incentives to support that transition. One of the things that we're looking at doing next year is a big campaign that it's kind of under wraps. No one knows about it yet, but I'll just give you cat out of the bag. It's an idea called Regenerate America, and the goal would be to garner 5 million signatures, making 5 recommendations for the 2024 Farm Bill to include incentives for regenerative ag. And so, that's one way that we're looking at how we can, because we do think it needs to be through incentive. There's not going to be, there needs to be some major incentive to get the confidence for people to make this transition. You're right, it's not going to be some altruistic idea that's going to drive most people down this road. It's going to be they've essentially landed on their face and they can't go any further based on their methods, or it's tight and they know that the way that the future is not going to look bright. And I think a big part of it is actually the children of farmers don't have interest in the current paradigm of agriculture. And so I'm hearing a lot of farmers are going and exploring interest in regenerative ag so they can have something to talk about with their sons and daughters on Thanksgiving or Christmas about something that might, interest the kid to come back to the farm. So that I can see that being, an opportunity for transformation and conversion.
I would be cautious to expect the government to be the cavalry here. Like the government, the war on poverty, the war on terror, the war on drugs. The government can barely run the DMV. And so I'd put the power back with the consumer. I'm much more confident that if the consumer demands regeneratively produced food and goes looking for it, and votes for it with their dollars, that the change will happen much faster. I'm a bit of a crusty old libertarian, and it's great. The Farm Bill thing, I think, is a great project. Why not? We got a Farm Bill anyway. But the government just can't pull anything off. They're just not very good managers. And to think that they're gonna transform agriculture, no, it's gonna have to come grassroots. Sorry to say, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, that actually ties back to a previous question there, which I think I had skipped over, which was, how can we motivate large operations to adopt regenerative practices? I mean, maybe getting the big behemoth to change might be
stop buying their crap.
Time consuming. But if the general public, kind of voted with their dollar and their choices, then you might get more grassroots effectiveness, essentially. So, all right, I'm going to scroll through here. There was.
I'll just say a couple more things.
Please.
I think the consumer and civic demand is a big deal because firsthand we know that the General Mills Corporation made a commitment to 1 million acres under regenerative management over the next 10 years. And, we were the catalyst for taking money from them and putting it to training their producers under the management of Gabe and Ray and the Soil Health Academy. And so they didn't do that because of an altruistic, narrative. They did it because they know that, people are understanding that Cheerios have loads of glyphosate and that's no longer going to do. And so they realize that they have to make some bold, and there's a coalition of probably 18 to 20 of the largest food producing corporations in the world that are making commitments. And again, prime opportunity for greenwashing. So I'm not holding my breath to see exactly what their commitments mean. But clearly there's people are awakening at that level that they need to make change. And I think at this point, this generation isn't like, you can't just put something fake. Like, people are digging in, people are finding out on the internet, and they're going to put it out if it's nonsense and crap. So I think this is where the call out culture, if people are just greenwashing regenerative agriculture, I think there will be a reckoning within the generation of social media and communications, to where people are going to have to start making more accountable declarations and actions within how they're producing their food.
Ryland, go ahead, Matthew.
I just want to give you an example of that real quick. A GMO potato was being developed. I think it was funded by partly by Burger King and McDonald's and so forth. It was moving ahead fast. And they tested it in England, and the English just said, no way, we're not eating our crisps. They call them crisps there. Yeah. Oh, no, chips. They're chips. They did not want GMO chips in England. And they just stopped developing that potato. There is no GMO potato that I know of in development right now because the consumer in England said no, and that's where they were testing it first. So just like that, we're not going to share our dollars, people will listen. No customer, no product. So that's where I think the hope is. And this next generation of farmers, these young kids that actually want to have a fulfilling life, bringing more life, regrowing the skin of this planet. I think there's a lot of young energy and super inspiring kids and we got to get them on land. We got to create access to land for them. And it's exciting. It's exciting, this next young generation of farmers.
Would you say that it might be because that next generation has heard about climate change? I mean, when I was growing up, there was no talk about this, it's like, this is a reality that they're dealing with. And if they understand what some of the solutions are, maybe that can move it forward. Ryland, there was a question here about how does Kiss the Ground empower communities who have been historically marginalized within agriculture, like migrant laborers, BIPOC, people who are not landowners and farm owners? I mean, the land access issue is huge. I agree.
Yeah, huge. This is definitely a conversation that's become very kind of up in front of Kiss the Ground as an organization, and we've made some commitments. Having our platform really reflect diverse voices and not just one of the within the recognition of how we kind of missed the mark in the representation and diversity of all the characters in the Kiss the Ground film. There's definitely a commitment to really using our platform and privilege to elevate the extraordinary work that is happening in small little pockets that maybe we weren't connected to in the regenerative ag movement or land stewardship movement. And I know Tristan shared about what Kiss the Ground is doing in relationship to indigenous people, indigenous communities. I was actually on a call with a gentleman named Zach Dejanew, who works with Intertribal Ag this week, talking about he has an ag finance model that's providing long-term loans to indigenous people that essentially there's a return for the investment, but the money, you don't have to pay the principal back for an extended, long kind of slow money, and that he's had a lot of success with. And so we're in conversations about how we can, support and get involved in supporting more indigenous people to get engaged in understanding their own historical relationship to land, and also getting the access to land. So it's not something that we have an explicit program for at this point, but we're actually we're raising $3.4 million and as in an impact fund over the next year, and 10% of that fund is going to other grassroots organizations that are specifically working with people of color and indigenous folks that are working specifically in the regenerative ag space that we haven't been as connected to. So wanting to be a catalyst and a support to some of those communities that have been oftentimes marginalized.
Yeah, there was a question earlier about, since we're on the topic of other organizations and other groups, they were wondering if you'd done any work or have any current relationships with Center for Land-Based Learning, and that would be in relation to training and giving technical support to new farmers. I mean,
I know.
Yeah, you probably know them, Matthew.
I know them, and two of the farmers from Land-Based Learning, Center of Land-Based Learning, have just, their father has just bought land. He came to a farm tour, got so inspired that he bought land like a quarter mile down the road on our street. And now his two kids, who were farming at the, living and farming at Center of Land-Based Learning, are moving down the street, or farming down the street from me. So that's pretty cool. We haven't done anything specifically with them, but except maybe trade interns and people, people that work there sometimes come here. Yeah, but I know I've met Craig McNamara, and we admire what they're doing.
Yeah, Sustainable Solano, we were in conversation with Center for Land-Based Learning around an urban agriculture grant. They were gonna check feasibility of some different urban ag plots and then potentially set up, kind of a training ground on the southern end of Solano, but we unfortunately did not get the grant. So to be continued, we'll try it again another time. Let's see, there was another question here. There's a lot in the chat. I gotta check. I think Allison is gonna somehow make the chat accessible to everybody.
I think there was a question about farm tours. So
yeah,
so we do farm tours every Saturday. You have to register online at 11. Includes a wine tasting at the end. 11 o'clock at Vila Farm on Saturdays. We also do a kids tour on Wednesdays at 3. Get your kids off their screens and experience like the farm and nature at 3 o'clock. And you also register online for that under events on Vila Farm website.
Awesome. One more question here. Ryland, does Kiss the Ground support any particular labeling program to help consumers identify regenerative produce or some other way to help consumers vote with their dollars? I don't know if there's regenerative. I mean, we all know about organic, but
yeah. So really, the certifications that are helpful are obviously there's biodynamic, which is better than organic. Obviously, there's organic, and then there's a new label that just launched called the Regenerative Organic Certification, which is probably about 60 or 80 brands are in test pilot phase with putting out products under that label. So that's a cool label. And then Savory Institute as a land to market label that is also representing regenerative leather and beef or animal proteins. And then there's some grass-fed labeling as far as when it comes to meat that you can that's representing animals that have been grass-fed and grass-finished.
But don't forget, the most powerful thing is to get to know your farmer. Go to farmers markets, talk to them what they're doing, what get out there and talk to your farmer and build trust, build relationship. That's really the best. That's your best certification.
Yeah, very true. Ryland, you had just posted something about foodprint.org, which is a food tax at restaurants that are supporting regeneration transitions or regenerative farming transitions.
Yes, started by a chef in San Francisco, Anthony Mint, who started a restaurant called Perennial that's no longer there, but it was a restaurant that was all focused on regen ag. And they're doing a project. It's called, I think it's foodprint.org. It doesn't look like it linked, but they're working with the state of California, and it's national. But it's a way that restaurants can add a 1% surcharge that becomes a fund that then goes to supporting farmers to set up their using that the Comet planner to set up regenerative farm plans.
Got it. All right. Any other questions out there? Again, feel free to do the raised hand Let's do that.
Oh yeah, one other thing, which is, anybody that's inspired by, the regenerative movement wants to participate. One of our big things is creating, as my dad said, a cavalry of regenerative advocates. And so we created a course called the Soil Advocacy Training, which is about 8 hours of content. And anyone who takes it, you really come out of it a real regenerator. And you can, speak the language, you can have the science, you can have the framing, and you can be transformed whatever world you operate in. You can be a real transformer in the way that, I got inspired 8 years ago and started becoming a regenerator, an evangelist. So we've refined that over 8 years and put it into a very kind of tight class that you can lead yourself through online. And it's called the Soil Advocacy Training. And then the other resource on kisstheground.com is the Find Your Path tool. If you're interested in, finding how you and your kind of where you are in your life and what you do, you can type in, it's like a little search wizard, who you are, what your interests are, and then it pops out 2 or 3 actions that you could take to support the regenerative movement. And that is Kiss the Ground activities as well as collaboration organizations across the movement. For example,
Ryland, is the soil advocacy training suitable for high school students? Somebody was wondering.
Yeah, absolutely. I just sent it to a high school student today, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Great. All right. Is this thing supposed to go an hour, Allison? Does anybody know?
Yes, until 5. So
Okay.
perfect
We're a
timing.
little over. Okay, if anybody has any last questions, I think now's your chance. Jump in there. No, maybe not. A lot of thanks. Okay, yeah, thank you so much, Ryland
Thank
and
you,
Matthew.
everyone.
All right, we have our marching orders. Check out the soil
Thank
advocacy
you.
training
Yeah.
and buy local and buy from your local farmer and get to know them.
Go do a tour at Be Love.
And go do a tour. All right.
Okay. Awesome.
Thank you,
so
everybody.
I appreciate you all. Have a good night.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.